All right, I think we're live. So welcome everyone to another Matt Maran Motoring live stream here on the Matt Maran Motoring YouTube channel. Hope you're all having a great weekend here. Thanks so much for stopping by. Like all the other usual live streams, we're going to go for about 2 hours or so. I'll give priority answering to anyone who does a super chat or a super thanks. So as anyone who's a member there with the green usernames, they always get that priority answering. If you'd also like that, there's always join buttons here and a link in the description. And so, see, we got a bunch of you have already joined in. Thanks so much for stopping by. Harsha, Brian, Grand, Cars, B. Mitchell, Anthony, Linda, Stillabuster, Danny, Wheatman, Vishal, Nicholas, and Dozier, Jordan Car Guy, Cam, Adam. Thanks so much for stopping by, everyone. So we'll get right into it here. First comment, Harsha says, spot of the week was my friend's Nissan Z. The car was 56 grand at CarMax. Car got traded in at 700 miles. Wow, that's how much I thought Z Performance, how much I thought they were, what, 50, were they 60 grand, something like that? So a little bit of a discount there. So that's nice for sure. And I'm glad to see someone picking one of those things up. Hopefully there's some better deals happening on those. And I saw Z, I don't know if it was this past week or the week before. My interesting spot of the week was a Fisker Ocean in Pittsburgh. Don't know how it got there. And I feel so terrible for the poor soul that somehow ended up in that vehicle. I hope they got an amazing deal, like free. Anything more than free, I think, for that is probably, even that's debatable. But anyway, that was kind of wild to see. And Grant, thanks so much for gifting 5 memberships there. I really appreciate the generosity. And hopefully some of the people in the live stream here are some of those recipients, so they can join in here and chat with us some more here tonight as well. But thanks so much again, Grant. I really appreciate that. And let me see. Grant also says his car spot of the week was an AMG C63 Cabriolet Coupe. Very cool. Yeah, those. I don't know if we're gonna ever see. I guess the CLE kind of is the replacement for that vehicle, but that is kind of really the last of its kind. At least as far as an actual C63, having the coupe there and the convertible. So that's awesome. Great spot. And hopefully, now the warmer weather starting to start up here, at least where I'm at. Hopefully we'll see some more and more fun stuff here as the weeks go on. But Cara says, hi, Matt and everyone. My spots of the week were a Rivian R1T and a white Ford Bronco, probably 4th gen. Nice. Very cool. It's always fun to see white Ford Broncos. And V. Mitchell says, greetings all. No major car spots this week. More notable is what I won't see anymore. So he says, a friend of mine had a garage fire and lost both of his BMWs, a 2002 530i 5-speed and Gulp, a 1968 2002. His dad bought new. Man, that really sucks. That's got to be so painful. I couldn't imagine. That's, man. And I feel like, B. Mitchell, didn't you also say there was another garage fire or warehouse fire? Someone lost a bunch of cars as well. This is it's crazy, all these fires. That really sucks. Sorry to hear that. And Anthony says, hey everyone, a couple cool spots this weekend was a new Hummer EV. That thing is huge, and then a Wrangler 6x6 behind it. I've never seen something that big. It made the Hummer look small. I've never seen a Wrangler 6x6. That's wild. Interesting. Cool spots. And Linda says, good evening. Thanks for stopping by, Linda. And Stillabuster says, hey guys, car spot of the week was a replica of the green Eclipse from the first Fast and Furious film. Body kit and decals were spot on. Wow, that is an awesome spot. That would have made me giddy for sure. The first movie, those cars are still some of my favorite modified cars ever. That's awesome. Great spot. And Michelle says, hey everyone, I saw an Ineos Grenadier for the first time this week. Pretty cool looking thing. Nice. Yeah, I've seen a few of those around here. People actually seem to really like them. I'm honestly shocked at how many I have seen out on the road, out in the wild. That's cool. You got to see one for the first time too. That's yeah, they're making their way all across the country little by little, I think. And let me see. Danny says, my 3 rare spots were awkwardly 3 Fords now. First was a 2016 Ford Focus Electric. That's rare for sure. A 2019 Ford Fusion Energy. And the final today was a 2nd-gen Ford Explorer 2-door. Nice. It was awesome when they did it with a 2-door. That was really, really cool. Yeah, those are fun. And Wheatman says, good evening, Matt, and congratulations on your new ride. I appreciate that, Wheatman. Yeah, it's been fun, and hope you guys all enjoyed the little vlog type video. I'm going along for the ride of that, and yeah, it makes me happy. It really does. Obviously, again, it's no sports car, but it's a fun little car. And just looking at it makes me smile. And seeing the red painted dashboard, it's just a fun little thing. And also all the running jokes this past week. Everyone's been kind of joking about nicknames for it. The spicy meatball, the Italian meatball. Someone said the brave little toaster. All kinds of fun little nicknames for it. So I haven't decided on what I'm going to do yet. I'm probably not going to do a custom plate just because again I'm not trying to spend a penny more on it. And just again keeping it very tight budget. But but it'd be fun to come up with a fun plate idea. Maybe I'll do like some kind of stickers or something on the back instead. But yeah, so appreciate that though, man. And Nicholas says I saw an Katsuchi yellow new Z this week. Just gorgeous. Interesting. I hopefully I didn't butcher that pronunciation, but so Z's are starting to pop up. That's good to see. And I hope that people are getting some good deals on them. And B. Mitchell says, okay, more follow-up here. The good news was that the 1951 Studebaker convertible that was his dad's first new car was stored elsewhere. Well, that's good. But since they bought a Volkswagen ID4 a month earlier, they're suspecting it's wired charger. Interesting. Well, if that's the case, then yeah, Volkswagen's probably going to be owing them some money because it definitely should not be any kind of fire related to that. Charger shouldn't have any issues either. So there must be either something faulty there, some kind of major issue, obviously. It's interesting. I haven't heard about too many EV fires recently, so that's kind of surprising. I don't think ID4 has had an issue with that. I know like Taycan's had an issue with that when they first came out. Bolts had their issue that again led to that massive recall and stuff. I haven't recalled another ID4 burning up though that I know of, but I'm sure there's some out there. I think just about every EV has had, some kind of fire, just like any gas powered vehicle at some point. But that's unfortunate. Hopefully, all gets taken care of. And again, if it is related to Volkswagen, then that's certainly something. Hopefully, they will make good on. Crazy. And Jordan, thank you so much for being a member for 17 months now. He says when a car is discounted, Pontiac, Fisker, Saturn, or maybe you mean discontinued, how is the VPN still legally relevant? Does GM and other companies still repair canceled vehicles? I'm not sure what you mean about VPN, but as far as when a car gets discontinued, it depends on the brand. Like, for example, Pontiac is a lot of GM carryover. So any Pontiac you can take to another GM dealer, or I guess depending on the Pontiac, if it's like the Matrix, Toyota Matrix, Pontiac Vibe, they shared a bunch of parts. You could take a Vibe to a Toyota dealer and they would know how to, service at least the mechanical stuff on that. So there's, things like that. You could do the Fisker though. That's where you're really up a creek because like there's no hope for you there. That thing, anything goes wrong with that thing. I mean, I guess there's still some kind of after sales support, but it's probably some skeleton crew that isn't going to actually be much help. But the GM stuff, you still have the backing of GM. And honestly, someone even brought that up with the Fiat. They're like, oh, well, Fiat's going to probably, go under and leave the States and all this stuff. I mean, Fiat is massive globally. So, even if they did choose to leave the US, you could still take it to any of the Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, Fiat dealers because they're currently trained and they know how to work on 500Es. And so even if Fiat up and left the United States, I could still take it in there. They still have the training for that. They still have the Stellantis, stuff in their system that they can download repair manuals for this stuff and figure things out, order parts, because Fiat is they were still the largest selling brand, and I think the largest profit brand too for Stellantis last year, just because again they're so massive everywhere else in the world still. So it's one of those things where it wouldn't really, I think, bother me even if Fiat did leave. You can still get service for them and they'll still get the support. So but a lot of times it depends. Again, it's a Fisker thing. It's more sketchy. If Polestar were to go away, maybe even them, even though they have a little bit of Volvo that's shared there, but some of these newer brands, that would be the bigger concern. But when we're talking about the other stuff that has larger parent companies. You don't really have too much to worry about there. But thanks so much, Jordan, for being a member for 17 months now. And Charlottetown Spud, thank you so much for a super chat. They said, now that the Civic Hybrid has equal power to the SI, what do you see for the future of the SI? More power or phased out? I mean, at least the way they're playing it right now is just the experience. Do you want a manual? Do you want still just the old school kind of experience of a regular turbo four-cylinder with no electrical assistance? That's how they're playing it right now, because obviously there's actually a performance disadvantage going for the SI these days, at least straight line performance. And I think it's one of the things that I have a very mixed feeling kind of situation about the SI, because part of me is like, just be competitive and just like, try to match the others on horsepower, or at least get close to GLI and, that kind of stuff. But then the other half of me also kind of respects that, there's been this growing consensus, I think, in the car world where everyone's burned out with super high horsepower stuff, and that it's almost, irresponsible to give regular people so much power, especially in these EVs and these hypercars, that any idiot with a large enough bank account can go out and buy something that can turn into a speeding missile in 2 seconds flat. So there's growing consensus that, like, maybe we went too far with the horsepower wars, and that maybe we need to again get back to, like, what is a responsible amount of power for an enthusiast vehicle. And I was listening to, it was a while back, maybe a few months ago, that Matt Farah did a podcast with Tiffany Dell from Fifth Gear. Anyone who is familiar with the UK car shows, that was the other one. He was also in the original Top Gear before they kind of switched the hosts up and all that. But anyway, they were talking about, like, really there's no reason for any enthusiast vehicle to have more than like 600 odd horsepower to have enough fun on the street to still be wildly fast. And then you don't have all this bloat of, now everything's got to be electrified to do more than that. And you got to have all this crazy stuff. And then it's like, well, now you need more power to compensate for the weight. Then you get more weight because of the extra power. And it's just this vicious cycle that keeps going and going and going. And so it was, this kind of thing. And so I think, getting back to the Honda, question, that's kind of why I am starting to almost respect Honda for being so stubborn with not giving the SI more power. Because I think, the ethos of an SI is, a 6.5 seconds 0 to 60, a 200 horsepower car. And, they kept the weight in check for the most part all these years as well. And it still is the same character that it always really had, at least as far as the amount of power and the amount of performance. Obviously, it does it in a different way, and I'd love to see VTEC come back and screaming engines and all that, but, it's not the same, but it's the same straight line numbers, relatively speaking, and it's, little improvements here and there, but I think, it is kind of a more responsible way of being like, let's not try and chase everyone in horsepower and outdo everybody and turn into this crazy thing where now all of a sudden everything's got to have, 500 horsepower to be a hot hatch, and you have some restraint. So, I don't know. I think either way they go about it will be fine in my book these days. I'd like to see, GLI levels of power. I'd like to see the Accord, the old Accord 2.0T, which I guess now is only in the Acuras, really, because Accord is now either 1.5 or hybrid, NA. But it'd be fun to see some more, and I think it'd just be, I just don't see them doing it the way Honda is. I just don't see them caring, and they seem to kind of be not worried about competition sometimes. And this is one of my frequent complaints with Honda, is that they don't match people on feature content. They're not like Hyundai and Kia, for example, that it's like, oh, everyone's doing 10-inch screens, we'll do 12. And oh, wait, everyone's, doing this out of the other. Let's make it bigger. Let's make it better. Let's do the things that no one else is doing. Like, no one else is offering cooled seats in a subcompact crossover. Let's do it. And, always been outdoing everyone in every way. And Honda doesn't really care. The Pilot sells great with one of the smallest screens in the industry, and, sells great with an old V6 when everyone else is trying to modernize, and, everyone else has hybrids and everyone else has plug-in hybrids, and they don't have any of that stuff, and, it's doing just fine for them. So I think they kind of, march to the beat of their own drum, and they're unapologetic. And so for that reason, I think you will see the same thing with SI and the same thing with the hybrid. And it's just makes people choose. Do you want that involvement of the manual and the old school kind of experience, or not? If you don't, then obviously the hybrid is the much better way to go. And honestly, I think there's room for the hybrid to get more sporty as well. I'd love to see a hybrid SI, or some kind of hybrid. I guess they already have the sport trim, which isn't actually sporty, but I'd like to see an actual sporty one, without going to the full blown Type R of something, maybe some kind of new branding, or I don't know what to call it, maybe the Mugen or something, and try and do some kind of extra little thing for the hybrid. And obviously the aftermarket's there too. But anyway, uh, long answer to your question, but I think that I don't think they're going to phase it out. I definitely don't think they're going to phase it out, and I also doubt they'll give it more power. I think they'll just keep on going with what they're doing. I think if they were going to phase it out, they would have done it already. And I think if they were going to give it more power so that you didn't have the overlap with hybrid, they would have done it already. And I think they made the choice already, and I think they're going to stick with that of two same kind of experiences from a power standpoint. Just pick your involvement level and how much you care about fuel economy. But great question. Thanks so much for asking. And Jordan, thank you for a super chat as well. He says, any way for the public to give an input on what consumers want? A new version of the 2009 Pontiac G8 GXP would be epic. I think, public forums, all these things that, a lot of these car companies do pay attention to, Reddit. They do pay attention to Facebook groups. They do pay attention to, YouTube comments, and they look at that stuff sometimes. I don't think they're always, sitting on the edge of their seat seeing what everyone's commenting on YouTube, but I think, either they, pop in from time to time, or they have their, data analysts that maybe compile a consensus from the community about X, Y, or Z, and things like that. But I think really one of the best ways to send input is telling a dealer what you want, because the dealers have more power, and they're the ones that can say, hey, people are really asking for this thing, and they, make it happen. I think, a really prime example of this was like the Lexus TX. Lexus dealers have been begging and pleading for a large unibody 3-row crossover from Lexus for years. And Lexus wanted to get that out so quickly, they even took the RX and stretched it with the RXL, which was, not very well done, but it was like they were so desperate to be like, okay, people really want a 3-row Lexus that's not a truck. Like, let's try and cobble something together. They did the RXL, but then they really, that was why I think, Grand Highlander, I don't know if that's the whole reason Grand Highlander exists, but I think that was a strong driver, was the Lexus variant, and people just desperately wanting that from the Lexus dealer. And that wasn't just Lexus dealers saying that for the fun of it. Like, they were saying that because Lexus buyers were coming into the showroom and saying, I don't want an LX, I don't want a GX, but I want 3 rows, and nothing you have cuts it for me. And then they go elsewhere. And that sends a message, especially if you're talking about loyal Lexus buyers that say, hey, I love my RX, but now I've got a third kid. What do I do? And they don't want a GX or an LX, and you don't have anything to sell them. And, so those are the things where if car companies know they have a gap in their lineup and they're losing people, then that's why they'll, do those types of things. And sometimes, rush out stuff like RXL. Subaru Ascent is another prime example. Subaru told in their public, presentations, Ascent exists because obviously there's certain Subaru buyers that have either more space needs, or they, have more than 2 kids. And where do you go if you're a Subaru fan and you have more than 2 kids? Well, you go somewhere else, until Ascent came in, and now you have that 3-row vehicle, and now there's no excuse, for anyone to leave the Subaru showroom. So I think there's those types of things. When you're talking about the enthusiast stuff, that's, a harder thing to sell. And for those, there's really no justification for it. It's just, do you have the business case? And then do you have the management and the leadership that wants to push this through? I think Toyota is a prime example of that. There's no good reason to have any of these sporty vehicles that Toyota has, honestly. Their halo, effect certainly, I guess, is a little bit of a factor, but there's really not a whole lot of justification. It's just that there's a lot of car enthusiasts in Toyota that just want to do these things. And thankfully they have the deep pockets to, justify looser business cases than some other companies, might be able to. And so, there's some of those things that happen. And I think GM was that for a long time. That's why we saw these quirky things and these fun partnerships and all this other stuff. Stuff like the Solstice and the Saturn Sky and all those other things. But I think GM, like many companies, is just really struggling to, their focus is profitable EVs because they know that's where they need to go, and they know that they need to get it profitable. And so I think that's why they're fully focused on that. And that's why, like I talked about 2 weeks ago, they shot down the idea of a new Camaro. And, it's just because I mean, a lot of these companies, again, especially with the Chinese competition knocking at their door, and the uncertainty of these tariffs and what to expect at all in the next 4 years, these car companies are all in a holding pattern, and so I wouldn't expect a lot of new ambitious sporty products, because again, they are risks, and again, especially when you're planning out a product that takes a few years to develop, and then you're expecting a 5-year lifespan out of it in order to try and recoup your costs. What kind of world will we be in at that point in time? Maybe it'll still be no EPA at all, and everything's just anything goes, and it's just the Wild West. Or maybe there will be some sentiment change, or maybe there will be some administration changes in the next 8 years we're talking about, between development time and then lifespan for this new vehicle. And so that's why things like that just are too big of a risk. If you're planning for a new G8 GXP, even if tomorrow GM started working on it, you're not going to see it until probably late 2020s here. And then again, that would have to go into the 2030s, and then you're having more crackdowns, at least from the EU and stuff, on some of these emissions regulations and stuff by that point in time. So then you're kind of driving yourself into a wall, and it's a whole thing. So there's a lot of those types of things that make it tricky. But anyway, I'll start to cut down on the length of my answers here, because I know I'm going on long tangents here. But go to the dealer and tell them what you want, and actually have not just I'm a tire kicker, but be like, I have this kind of money, I really want this kind of a car from this car company, please tell them that I would totally buy this thing if they made it. And those types of things are where they go to the dealer meetings, and the dealers say, hey, do you think you can do a new G8? People would really love it. Or obviously GM is aware, and there's a cult following for all these things already, and that people would love to see it. But again, it's all about that business case. Again, if they can't justify a Camaro, stuff like a G8 is going to be probably about as tough, even though I guess the 4 doors would help. But anyway, Jordan, thank you also for another super chat. He says, GM cut Pontiac to make Cadillac luxury/sport. Pontiac just got cut because of the recession. It was just one of the casualties. And Bob Lutz actually, in many interviews, he was kind of one of the ones running the show at that point in time. He really fought to save Pontiac. And he wanted to cut other stuff too, but it was just to make sure Pontiac stuck around. But that was one of the ones. The board, I think, was just like, we got it, that this is one that has to get cut. I can't remember the exact specifics. You can look that up if you're curious. But Pontiac just got cut because they had to tighten their belt at GM, and that was one of the casualties. Thankfully, Cadillac did step in and kind of take that place. But again, it's a lot more expensive than a comparable sporty Pontiac would have been, these days. So, anyway, yeah, thank you again, Jordan, for the super chat. And I do hope that maybe someday Pontiac comes back in some form. And Preston Johnson, thank you so much for your first super chat. I really appreciate that. He says, hello, Matt. What are your thoughts on the RTV issues on the GR86/BRZ? I just ordered one, and this seems to be the only reliability concern. Thanks. Yeah, so as far as the RTV issues, there's been a lot of others that have documented this really well, and that have really done a lot of good research on this. Savage Geese did, I think, some good discussions on this. I personally am not worried about it. If I had the means and the justification for a GR86 or a BRZ, I would totally own one without hesitation, daily drive it with a clear conscience and with no worries at all about RTV issues. The thing to keep in mind about those kinds of issues is, one, there's always two sides to every one of these stories that we're hearing about this kind of stuff. Because there are some of these, I can't remember, there was one or two where it was a very widespread story, and the social media, of course, blows these things up. And that's also one thing I had to keep in mind with in the EcoBoost days of the Mustang EcoBoost. When I had one of those, I was terrified, because I go on the forums every other day and see, oh, my EcoBoost motor blew up in my Mustang. I was like, oh man, this thing's a ticking time bomb. It's gonna be unreliable, blah, blah, blah. And then it's just that, the reality is skewed whenever you're only seeing that negative. And, everyone that's happily driving around in their vehicles isn't going online and saying, I had a great day today and my car didn't blow up. Like, no, you're only hearing about the people who said, my day was crappy and here is, my car on a tow truck. And, they're the ones that are, on the online making a fuss. Everyone else is going about their day, having a nice day in their car. So, that's why, yes, there were some RTV issues. And yes, there is an actual, engineered issue there. But how often does that actually present in a catastrophic failure or something that really screws up the car to the point of damaging anything? I think it's very, very rare. And I know, one of my good friends, Eric, from Rev Match TV, great channel, he actually tracks his GR86 in like the cup races, not the professional like GR86 Cup with those actual, cup cars, but it's the regular like street series with regular factory GR86s. And I don't know how many miles he's put on that thing on track. He's done a ton of stuff, and he's actually, I think, covered this a little bit as well, but I've talked to him as well personally and been like, what do you think about this? Like, this is a guy who's, beating the snot out of his GR86 every other weekend hard, and I'm like, are you worried about this? He's like, no, I'm not worried at all. And none of the other people in that group are worried either. And none of them have had issues. So some of this stuff I've heard, like, some of these things, like when the reason why Toyota like denied the one warranty claim is they looked at the ECU data and saw this person was like sitting at redline for a long time. And sure, the red line is there for a reason. You should be able to sit at red line all day and be fine. But, it's just like when you look at some of the data, maybe it tells a different story. And the owner is not going to say, oh, I just don't know how to drive my car. They're going to say, well, this thing blew up and it should blow up no matter what I do, unless I'm money shifting or something. And I think one of them actually was a money shift, and that might have come out later or wasn't publicized as much as the other drama was. But, there's, again, it's certainly there's some stuff where I think Toyota made some mistakes with both GR86 and with GR Corolla. Even if the owner was in the wrong, I don't think this is something people would take advantage of. People aren't looking to blow up their car. So I think, even if they had grounds for denial that were rightfully, just, I still think they should have just covered some of this stuff to avoid the bad press. Is it worth, saving $100,000 in motors, even if that's how many motors blew up, which is a lot of motors, even if you spend $100,000 on that, I think the $100,000 is worth saving the image of a vehicle that then, everyone goes online and, gets upset. I mean, so even someone just commented on one of my videos a couple of days ago. They just picked up a GR Corolla, and one of the first comments, someone's like, "Oh, you can't drive over 85 miles per hour in that," and all this stuff haunts these vehicles for years after, and so it's unfortunate. So certainly there's some blame on both sides, I think, with some of this stuff, but at the end of the day, even with the issues, they're very few and far between, very rare. And, I don't think it's usually like an actual issue. It's also, this is a car that, especially the Japanese, they really spend a ton of time on R&D, like obsessive R&D, like almost, perfectionist level R&D with these things before these actually are out in the wild. And so, sure, there's some things that still are engineered in that they miss, or just, recognize there's a limit here, like the GR Corolla's rear diff, where you do a few laps and it will overheat. That's a fact, and that's just the way it is, and that's the way they engineered it. But with the RTV issue, that's something that they've flogged these cars, for years at this point before they actually make it into the public hands. And, yes, I'm sure they had a few failures as well. But again, it's all about the numbers game of how often does this failure happen? Any failure is going to happen to any motor in any vehicle eventually. But what are the numbers and what is the percentage? And the reality is, most of the time with most of these vehicles, even enthusiast vehicles, the percentage is tiny, especially if it's just a huge volume of cars and mass production. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much personally. Again, everyone's luck will be different, and it is like any car could have a lemon, you could just have a bad apple. I mean, my one Mustang GT was just cursed with, being an accident magnet, and had 2 accidents in the first year. The first one happened 8 days after I got it. I mean, there's always, fluky things that happen. So nothing's ever 100% safe bet, but I would have full confidence buying a GRD6 or BRZ personally. And again, people I know that track them, no issues. So I wouldn't worry too much about that myself. And if you do continue to stick with the order there, then I hope you enjoy to the max. And yeah, they're fantastic cars. Highly recommend them still. Thank you again for the super chat. And Jeremy, thank you for a super chat as well. He says 2025 Expedition versus 2025 Tahoe. Test drove both, but 2024 model year and Tahoe is way better. Don't know if refresh will change anything. I mean, it's a heavy refresh for Expedition, and I think there were some really nice improvements. I, did my first look on it. I'm sure you probably already saw that. If you didn't, then definitely check it out. I did a walk around last summer on the 2025 Expeditions. I will actually be driving that vehicle here in a few months as well. And just giving my thoughts on it there. I'm hoping to also get a new, refresh Tahoe at some point too. But I mean, yeah, it's been a long time since I drove an Expedition, so I can't say for sure. But from my past experiences in Expedition and Tahoe, Expedition had a little bit of a softer ride, but Tahoe, has the V8, which you can't match in Expedition. So it's more of a personal preference thing. I think the interior is more impressive in Expedition these days, but Tahoe has the better, hands-free system with Super Cruise. So there's, a lot of give and take here. So it really comes down to what your priorities are. Blue Cruise is, still really good. And I think the second, best system, behind Super Cruise there. But it really just comes down to personal preference, I think. But I think, 2024s are a big difference for Expedition. And also Tahoe, gets some nice improvements for 2025 too. So if you're curious between the two, I'd wait and, drive the new versions because they did do a bunch of improvements to both of those. But it's personal preference, honestly. If I had to pick between one or the other without having driven either of those new ones yet, I'm inclined to say Expedition. It feels a little more plush inside. Feels a little more worth the money. Tahoe still has a lot of hard plastics and cheaper materials. Expedition just feels more worth the money to me. But it'd be nice to have the V8 too. So yeah, all difference of opinion, but I'd probably go Expedition myself, especially if I didn't do a ton of highway driving. So, but anyway, thank you so much, Jerry, for the super chat. And Jorge, thank you so much for the super chat as well. I really appreciate that. And just says thanks. And thanks so much to you. I really appreciate that. And Sean, thanks so much for being a member for 32 months now. He says, there are at least 6 C4 vets in my small Southern California city for sale, private sales in various conditions. Talk me out of a second car project I don't need. I like C4 Corvette. Sorry to be a devil's advocate here. Not what you want to hear. I like the C4. It's really fun. It's not an amazing performance vehicle these days, obviously, but it's fun. I love the digital gauges in them and the futuristic, 80s kind of vibe. I like C4 honestly more than C5 and C6, to be completely honest. Maybe C6 Z06 is an outlier there, but I think C4 is my favorite besides C7, C8. I also really love, obviously, the earlier ones, C1, 2, and 3, but C4s are cool. If it's really, I don't know what they're going for these days, but if they are really cheap, that could be a really fun little, toy. And I can't find any ways to talk you out of it aside from they're not safe, which I'm assuming you don't care about if you're tempted by, a 1980s or early 90s sports car anyway, then, you already know you're not going to be getting, a brand new Volvo from a safety standpoint. But that's about the only negative thing that I can think of, because otherwise it's a reliable powertrain. It's easy to find parts, I'm sure, easy to work on, good aftermarket support. I can't say anything bad about a C4 Corvette, honestly. I want to revisit one someday too, because they are fun, and I'm sure you probably already saw my review on it, but if you haven't, check that out. It was fun. I tried to do a little bit of a vintagey kind of 80s inspired intro on that one back when I was doing those musical intros, but best of luck deciding. Sorry, I'm no help. And Jordan, thank you for another super chat. He says, how does digital everything non-physical buttons make sense when texting is illegal? Um, Valid point. I think, the difference with, some of these things, at least with CarPlay, it's limited with what you can do. There's not like a full-blown keyboard in CarPlay. You can't have a keyboard in CarPlay. It's all, either voice stuff, Siri stuff, or it's very limited options. So there's a little bit there, and I think that's kind of the justification for the safety component, is they limit what you can do in their definition of what is too distracting and what isn't. But I agree that, yeah, if you have to, figure out buttons and poke around with stuff, then it's not great. So I think, this is hard for me to judge because I don't live with vehicles long enough to build up muscle memory. Having them for a week, I'm still usually fumbling around after, a few days sometimes with some of these things. But, a lot of people, though, I think do build up muscle memory to the non-physical buttons as well. You still kind of eventually learn where those capacitive touch things are, or you just get used to that minor distraction. Maybe you get a little more adapted to that than you were before. But I think it's just, yeah, them trying to find a way to do it, in a less distracting way. I think really the problem why it's not illegal to have, no buttons and knobs in your car or whatever, is just that with a phone, there's no limit to what you can do. You could be playing, some game, you could be scrolling, watching videos, whatever. That's, I think, the potential. Texting is illegal, but it's more so, I think a lot of the states that I've seen, like Maryland, it's just like handheld phone use is illegal. So it's not even just texting, or the act of typing up a message that's really the problem. It's just like you being on your phone is the problem in general. I think that's kind of the heart of those laws. But maybe some other states make a differentiation for texting. I don't know, but all the states around me, it's just like they don't want it's just, you have to be in a hands-free situation is kind of the bottom line there. And I think, even if you don't have physical knobs for your climate control, like how often are you adjusting the temperature? Especially if, so many cars have auto climate control these days, it's a really a set it and forget it kind of thing. So I think that's why car companies thought they could get away with that, is it's just like, well, how often are you actually changing where the air is blowing, or how often are you actually changing the temperature, or doing any of these other more complex tasks? And it's honestly probably not very often. So I think that's why it's not as egregious of a offense as texting while driving and stuff. But I can understand your point for sure. And and companies like Hyundai are going back to more physical controls, and I think companies are figuring out pretty quickly a lot of people don't like this, and it's not worth the cost cutting potentially, especially if cars aren't really cheap anyway. So it's like you're cost cutting, but you're still putting out something that's super expensive. So, and you're still not making that much profit on some of these things anyway. So it's just kind of like, why bother upsetting customers? We might as well just put the buttons back. So I think we are going to see a return of buttons. I think Hyundai is again kind of ahead of the curve there. But let me see. Luke, thank you so much for a super chat. He says, my first car was a 1998 Mercedes C230. To 0 to 60 time was 10 and a half seconds, but that car never felt slow. Our numbers just lie. Yeah, so I think getting back to the earlier discussion there of just, cars getting too fast in some cases. Yeah, I think, people were used to for a long time cars being slow and a 10 and a half seconds 0 to 60 being normal. You look at even the sportier stuff of the muscle car era of the 60s and how fast they actually were. They weren't actually that fast. And obviously all the 70s and 80s and 90s, very few actual fast vehicles. So that's, I think, part of why we're seeing, this rise in traffic deaths and all these other issues, is that you're giving people way more power than they historically have ever had by a good margin. Obviously there's some exceptions. You still have nice, slow Subaru Crosstreks and stuff, but, there's a lot of stuff with a lot of power, and especially as everyone, hops into Tesla Model 3s and things like that, where every one of them has, a faster to 60 time and instant acceleration. It's a lot for some people to handle, and too much for some people, honestly. Even if they're not trying to go for a fast car, just like regular cars, are a little overwhelming for some people. And so I think it's just, I don't know. I think there's nothing wrong with slow cars. As much as I'm an enthusiast, like, I can see the other side there. But yeah, so thanks so much, Luke, for the super chat. And all right, I'm gonna try and again make sure we don't get too far behind on the member questions here tonight. Again, try and keep my stuff a little more concise here. And I see some more people saying hello. And Six Look says this is episode 99. I know. We'll have to see if there's any fun thing we can do for the 100th episode since I started counting them. We've been doing them more than that, but yeah, it'll be fun to do episode 100 next week. And let me see. Cam Jam says, Matt, can you take the 500E and Mach-E to an autocross just for fun and compare? I wouldn't mind doing that myself. It just motor, like anything that's any kind of track driving, autocrossing, that stuff never gets views. And it's not like views are the end all be all of why I do a video, but like to do something like that, it's always on a weekend. And I really like keeping weekends for the family and not. And I mean, sure, they could come and watch or whatever, but like I like doing stuff that like my 4-year-old daughter wants to do. She's gonna be 4 in 2 months, but my toddler wants to do. And standing around watching cars swerve around would be fun for a little bit, but it's one of those things. If anyone has toddlers can understand, that would be like a real fun idea for maybe 20 minutes, and then after that, it's like, all right, what are we doing next? Like, how do we get out of here? Where's what? It's so. It's a challenge for me to do anything on the weekends like that. And especially if no one's going to watch it, again, relatively speaking, obviously you would, Cam, and maybe, a few other people, but, and the 500E would be fun. The Mach-E though, it's not, it's not a vehicle that would be that rewarding on an autocross course. I know it'd be fun. Actually, if you're curious about that, I will give a little plug to my other fellow Pittsburgh YouTuber here, Car Guy 11. He actually has a Mach-E. It's an identical looking one to Beth's Mach-E, but it's just the larger battery pack. But he actually did take his to an autocross course as well as a track day. So Car Guy 11, look him up. You can watch how he goes around the course in the Mach-E. It's a handful. Again, 225 wide tires with a car that weighs over 5,000 pounds is, or it's 235 wide. It's a comical experience. The Mach-E is not a great handling car, I will say. It handles fine, and it's a good family car, but it is definitely not a sporty vehicle, really. So that would be, the 500E would genuinely be a joy. And if I had the time to burn, I'd do it just for myself and maybe throw a GoPro up and just upload it and, not care about any kind of editing or anything. But, and maybe someday I will. I mean, I got 3.5 years with the 500E. If, I end up having some kind of, crazy stars aligning thing where I have a Saturday to myself or something, that could be certainly fun. I think that car would actually be, I'd like to do it myself. So never say never. We'll see, but just, don't count on it anytime soon. But I would like to. I appreciate the suggestion too, and I'd love to do more again track stuff. It's just nobody watches track stuff, unfortunately. At least the way I do it, the way most people do it. I mean, this is like a running joke in the car reviewer world. Like I was just talking to that dude in blue about this when we were on the 4Runner drive last month. It's like, everyone knows you don't do track footage because no one watches it. So it's just the nature of YouTube. And he even said, this is something we do for fun for ourselves, but the second we try and do a video about it, no one watches it, so it's just universal in the YouTube car world. Do track videos for yourself, or if you don't care about views, but if you're trying to do it as a career, it's not a good source of viewership. But I hope to do it someday. Let me see. Jordan, thank you for another super chat. He says, did the 0 to 60 idea originate from vehicles encountering the USA interstate on-ramp? No, I don't know where 0 to 60 came from, to be completely honest. I think it was probably just in the early days of drag racing and, just straight line acceleration. It is very much an American idea for sure. But I think it's more so just, one of those easy metrics of, yes, the merging idea, I think probably played into it. but very rarely are people actually going from zero. So I think it was just, I don't know how it ever caught on. That's an interesting question. It'd be fun to kind of research that a little bit more. But I think there's, it just was probably one of those things that started in drag racing and kind of carried into, excuse me, that world as well of just regular cars. Thank you so much, Jordan, for another great question in super chat. And let me see here. Find my place again. So where were we here? Wait a minute. I lost my place again. I thought I found it and then I didn't. Stand by. Let me see. So Daniel says, good evening from the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. Very jealous. Must be beautiful there right now. And hope you're having a good time driving those roads. Raphael says, hello all, a Nissan Z this week, my first, so someone actually bought them. Wow, everyone's seeing Z's this week. Interesting. They must have had a sale or something, or dealers finally coming to grips with reality. I don't know, but that's great. And Ryan says that all of them are $3 to $7 grand off MSRP in many places now. Somehow they quietly caught up, then flooded the market. There was some supply constraints originally, and then dealers again just feeling like they had Ferraris for a while, far longer than they should have. But I think they're finally, realizing they got to just dump these things. So I'm glad to see people finally getting deals. And Jazz is asking if I'm having fun driving the Fiat. Yeah, I haven't driven it much since I got it home, which again that's the whole point of the vehicle and why, I'm fine with, that kind of a, low mileage situation with, 5,000 mile lease and, 140 miles of range. But yeah, it's a really fun little thing to run around in. It really does make me happy. Let me see. Chad says, I saw a Publix worker admiring and taking a pic of a classic Corvette. The owner came out and saw him. He opened the door for him and let him sit in it. That's awesome. That's the kind of stuff that really is so fun to, share that passion with people and be nice about it. Michelle says, someone in my neighborhood still has that Fisker Ocean. I always feel sorry for them every time I see it drive by. Yeah, you should let us know when you stop seeing that Fisker Ocean. Because I'm sure it'll be sooner rather than later. I mean, maybe the thing will last 10 years. I think that would even be ambitious, honestly, but we'll see. So keep us posted on that, Michelle. I'm very, very curious. And Truck and Car Guy says that interesting spots just today was, I think, a Ferrari 599 and a Bentley Continental. Not too familiar with the front engine V12 Ferraris. Nice. That's awesome. They're all fantastic, no matter which one it is. And Mr. 705 says, "Hi Matt, happy Sunday from Ontario, Canada. Appreciate that. Hope you're doing well." And let me see here. I know there's some other non-member questions I'm skipping. I will try and get back some of those. Feel free to ask your questions again later. Once I get a little more caught up here, I don't want to get away, have the other questions get away from me too much here. But Jorge, thank you so much for being a member for 35 months. You're going to be, the 3-year mark here in March, I'm assuming. And thanks so much for being one of the first members as well. I'll have a new badge here. We'll be working on it this week for those that are going to be crossing the 3-year mark here this month. And thank you so much. It really means a lot. He says, I've seen 2 Fisker Oceans. That's one more than the Zaz have seen. The ZAs I've seen. I'm not sure. The Zs. I guess you're just saying the Nissan Zs. Well, that's actually, that's an impressive feat. You've seen more Fisker Oceans than Nissan Zs. That is, I don't know. I hope that, Nissan dealers really start to push those things out at a better rate this year. We'll see. And thank you again for being a member, Jorge. And let me see other questions from members. So let me see. Cam says, please name the 500e Enzo. Enzo would be funny. That's a good idea. I hadn't thought about any like Ferrari related stuff. It's a good one. I'll say that'd be an easy plate too if I were to do a plate. Dylan says, I think Pomodoro would be a good name for your car, which means tomato in Italian. That's fun too. Yeah, there's no shortage of fun little Italian names for that thing. Let me see. Truck and Car Guy, thanks for weighing in there. And Harsha says, the only thing I think will happen to your 500 is electrical problems. Italian cars have horrible electrical systems. True. But the old 500Es actually were pretty reliable. There's some people that still are rocking their old 500Es without issues. And Stellantis electrical stuff certainly could be problematic. But again, I felt confident because the 500E has been around in the same form for this new gen even since 2021 in Europe. So it's been around a while. And so, I did look up online and I saw some people complaining about quirks and weird electrical gremlins and stuff. But a lot of those complaints were happening in 2021, 2022 over in Europe. And then it got kind of quiet and I didn't see any more recent complaints. There's a few odd little, quirks and stuff that people don't like. But as far as like my car has failed me, I didn't see any of that stuff myself. I mean, I didn't spend, days researching it, but I did, look around for an hour or two and try and, kind of get a consensus of that before I pulled the trigger of like, is this going to be a complete basket case? I'm also not worried about issues because I'm making a conscious decision that like unlike the Mini that had a bunch of issues and I could have milked that for so many views with just running it into the ground and being like, let's see how crappy this thing will be and how much it'll desert me on the side of the road before and just document my misery. It would have been YouTube gold. And I did a little bit of that. There's the one video of me literally with the car steaming and I don't know if I showed it in the video, but I was like a few hundred feet away from a strip club too that was like happened to be there. And that was like just on my way home whenever I used to live with my parents. But it was very, much like steam coming out of the vehicle. I'm on the side of the road. I'm upset. And that video did really well. And if I had continued with the vehicle, maybe I would have had more of those kinds of videos. It would have been great. But at that point in time, it was actually my daily driver. I actually needed that car every day to work. I just couldn't handle, the unreliability factor back then. But now it wouldn't be as big of a deal. Yes, I don't want to be stranded on the side of the road ever or have any issues. I don't have time for that. I don't want to, I hope it doesn't happen. But now at least it's a backup car. I usually have press cars. We have, Beth's car, and there's other options. And so I'm going to document everything. If it turns out to be a complete nightmare, I'm going to spend the next 3.5 years saying how this thing's terrible. And if it's not, then, again, I'll just do a yearly update on, what it's like. And that's it. But I'm not worried about that. Even if it is a worst case scenario, it's going to be YouTube gold. And if it's not, then I'm happy with that too. I don't need it to be, a viral sensation, but if it turns out to, be a disaster, it's just going to benefit me, honestly. So I feel like either way, I'm okay, is kind of my feeling on it. Obviously for other people, if it is going to be your car, you're going to drive every single day and you need to, make sure it's 100% reliable, then sure, I think you're probably better off getting something else that, might be a little bit more solid. But again, they've really had a proven track record in the past few years. So that was my main calming thing that gave me the confidence to drive it home from Ohio and all that kind of stuff. And knock on wood, in the first week here, no issues at all, with that. So, we'll see what happens though. And Trenton Car Guy says, we took my aunt's Pontiac Grand Am to a local Chevy dealership and they turned it away saying it was too old. Interesting. So I guess that's why those independent shops are so important, to still work on some of that stuff. That's interesting. And Darnell says, I am worried about the 5-foot tall truck hood lines than 500 horsepower equivalent electric cars. Valid point. And I very much, I see what you mean. And I totally agree. I think, that's because especially when you look at crash data and stuff like that kind of, mass is certainly, very much problematic, especially, with pedestrians. And this is why we're seeing way more pedestrian deaths than ever before because everyone's in huge trucks and stuff. So I agree. And that is something I can't remember where I heard this, but I feel like there is starting to be a growing consensus in the industry. They need to kind of rein in these super high hood lines and try to do a better job of fixing. I mean, they see the data too. And I mean, they don't want their vehicles to be, killing machines. So I think that's something that is going to try and be a focus here with, future truck designs a little bit more. How much we'll see. But, I think that's something that hopefully they will rein in a little bit. Hopefully we'll just have to wait and see. Let me see. Cam Jam says, talking about Honda not adding more horsepower to the SI, my dream car is the second gen NSX, which I know is a hot take. It's slower than rivals, but who cares? Looks great, crazy quick, reliable, and efficient. Yeah, they're great. Um, I always thought that car never got enough love, and it's just it was also the time that car was birthed in. That car was came out in the Hellcat era of ever increasing horsepower and everything just being crazy. But I mean, I said this in my video when I reviewed one, and I stand by it that it was a car from the future. Like truly, they're doing E-Ray stuff 10 years before Corvette got around to it, and other companies slowly starting to add that stuff in. I mean, they weren't the only one. You had some of that stuff with the hypercars like the Porsche 918 and others. But, to do that in something that is that cheap, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious how they've depreciated it. I wonder if they will get to a kind of a bargain standpoint eventually where, if they aren't being appreciated by people and, there's other shinier stuff out there for people to dump their NSXs for, there may be a good value for this. I haven't looked them up in a long time, but I wonder, yeah, if they're going to start getting affordable, that'd be fun to see. And Carr says, I always enjoyed watching Fifth Gear and Tiffany Dell. Back in the day, it was typical for car enthusiasts to say the 200 horsepower was the max for a front-wheel drive car. Even now, 250 to 300 horsepower for front-wheel drive is plenty for me. Yeah, I mean, because this is the problem with like even, Civic Type R and others like that, where you have, it's still a struggle from a torque steer standpoint sometimes. I mean, they've done a very good job with Type R and Integra Type S to rein it in, especially in the dry. But, I mean, and I talked about this when I had my week with the Type R, I drove that thing in the rain, and I mean, 265 wide tires still, especially in the rain. I mean, that thing was spinning like crazy with only 315 horsepower, whatever it is, So, I mean, I think that is really the limit. I think this is why you're not going to see a 400 horsepower Type R, I don't think. As far as a front wheel drive hot hatch, I think they've understood that, like, we really shouldn't push much beyond this. And they do the other enhancements and other things that make it better and better. But like, there is some of that where like you start adding so much power, you end up just like hurting yourself in the end. And it actually makes you either slower because you can't put down the power, or it just turns out to just be a mess. And I mean, anyone who's, has a high horsepower front wheel drive car can probably understand. I mean, it's a riot. It's a complete blast. I've driven, some modified stuff that's front wheel drive and, crazy horsepower. It's fun, but, from a manufacturer standpoint, if you're actually trying to turn fast laps, it gets to a point where too much power is a bad thing, so it's a fine line. And that's why the aftermarket's great. If you want to have a complete basket case of a vehicle, you can knock yourself out and enjoy it to your heart's content, so yeah, but it was an interesting discussion. I highly recommend that episode. Tiff has some interesting hot takes and things like, and he thinks like 300 horsepower should be the max for front wheel drive, rear wheel drive 600 or whatever, and he had all these like various things where he didn't think things should be too fast. He also didn't know what a Lucid was, which was kind of funny in the podcast. Like Matt Fair had to explain to him like what the company Lucid was and what the Lucid Sapphire was. He'd literally never heard of it, which I kind of found almost like impossible, but that way he was like, oh, okay. Like, and it was kind of funny. So, I mean, some of these guys, especially if they're out of the game now and they're not, reading every new magazine about, this car and that car, and they're not staying up to date, then, some of that stuff falls through the cracks. But I couldn't believe he didn't know what the Lucid Sapphire was. But anyway, Vishal says, will Honda add an HRV hybrid? Kind of an obvious no-brainer thing to do when Corolla Cross has it. Toyota has nailed it in this aspect by offering hybrids in every car they make. I agree. And that's part of why Toyota sales just continue to be amazing. And they're really killing it. But I think a hybrid HRV is happening for sure, especially now that we see it in Civic. I think HRV is the next one to get. Honestly, I'm expecting it this year just because, Honda has said they want to hybridize, a lot. I think, a lot of their lineup pretty quickly. And especially, it's harder to do for Pilot or something like that. But for the low hanging fruit of stuff that is on the same platform that already has a hybrid, it's seriously just like bolting it in, pretty much, so I think that'll happen pretty soon. And it'll be a nice power upgrade for HRV too when they do, like just like it is for going from regular Civic to Civic Hybrid. So that'll be great. And let me see here. Stud Muffin, thank you so much for a super chat. I really appreciate that. He says, if France promised to build cars in America, do you think brands like Renault would sell in the US market? I mean, the French have tried, in the past, and it's a different market now than it was in the past when they tried. But, I don't, you know, I I think that maybe, some of them, I mean, we know Alpine is going to try with electric crossovers, which I wish them all the best, but that sounds like a tough hill to climb for them. But um, I think a lot of these companies, especially with the uncertainty of these tariffs, I think a lot of companies are going to actually be like, you know what, we're good. We don't need to worry about the American market because we don't know what to do for the American market. We don't, if there's no clear goals, then it's like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, sure, you could say build the cars in America, but then they're going to be too expensive, or they're going to be, lose some of their Frenchness. And then it's also like companies like Renault, they also have, some grants from the federal government there and also this stuff. So I just, the building cars in America thing is a big risk. It's one thing to say, hey, let's ship our stuff over here and try, because then you can say, okay, well, we'll try and sell stuff. If it doesn't sell, okay, not a big deal. We go home with our tail between our legs and it's the end of the story. But like, you know, putting up factories first, hoping that people are going to buy your car, I mean, that is a multi-billion-dollar gamble that is very risky. And when you have a track record of it failing with French cars, I mean, that would be like a complete Hail Mary of a business case that I don't think that would ever get approval. So, and I mean, that's the thing with a lot of this stuff. If there's proven vehicles, they may try to shift production around, like Mercedes is talking about potentially, moving some of the C-Class production back to South Carolina where it actually was for a while, and moving some of that in, some of the big sellers, shifting some of this stuff around in existing factories. But car factories take years to build, years. And then, again, and we got, 4 years, and then, this might not be a thing. It might still be a thing. But, it's just, again, and then it's like, what stuff gets tariffed? Like, say, for example, you build a factory in America. Great. So you got your factory in America and you think you're going to be all good with the American government. But then what if they start taxing foreign components, which has also been something that's been brought up already. So if they're already talking about, like, not only is it not good enough to just build your car here, but all the stuff that's in your car has to be built here and produced here, which is like nothing is 100% American content. Not a single vehicle, I think, in America that's built here. I don't think there's a single thing that has 100% American content. So then you start adding in costs from that stuff. And so if you're getting all this French stuff from France or other suppliers in Europe, and then you're shipping that stuff in, and even if you're assembling the car here, and you say, oh, sweet, we have no tariffs because we're putting it here. And they say, just kidding. Now we're slapping a tariff on this. And this is why companies are not going to just jump over into the United States, because then it's like, well, maybe we're going to get a tariff on this, a tariff on that. I mean, everyone thought that Canada and Mexico were safe bets. And this is why we've had, cars built in these places for decades, because it was a safe bet. These are our allies. These are our friends. They're right across the border. This is easy. This makes sense. And it saves us some money sometimes, or it just gives us more workers that we are struggling to find in America, is oftentimes the case, especially in Canada. It's not like they're getting paid any less than America. It's just that there's more bodies to do these jobs because we ran out of all the bodies here in the States that are willing to, get paid, relatively low wages still to, put cars together. And so, yeah, that's kind of the problem. If there was a clear roadmap, I think brands just want rules. Whatever rule, they don't care what the rules are. They just need a set of guaranteed rules, and they will play by them. But whenever you keep changing the rules every week, they're not going to do anything, because these car companies that, they're not going to spend billions of dollars and then have one tweet flip the whole thing upside down. So that's why it's not going to work with these brands. It's just I don't see any way that it would. But it'd be fun to see. I mean, I love Renault. I think their stuff's really cool. I'd love to see every single brand sell stuff in America. It'd be really fun. There's a lot of forbidden fruit in Europe that I'd love to see here in the States, but there's good reasons for a lot of them for why we don't have this stuff. And I don't think anything's going to get any better as far as getting foreign cars in the next 4 years, sadly. But we can dream. And thank you so much, Stud Puffin, for the super chat. And let me see other questions here. So where were we here? So let me see. Harsha says, who is the buyers of Maybach? They seem to be just fancy versions of S classes, which are already very nice. People who, especially among rich people, it's just outdoing the other person. So it's like, yeah, you have the S class, I got the Maybach. And, that one-upmanship is, I think, half of the appeal because there's not a whole lot there to justify the Maybach other than that. I think the Maybach, you can get the V12. So that's, again, a very real perk for certain people. Because I don't think you can get V12 in regular S class. I could be wrong, but I don't think you can here in the States. Anyway, it's just that. I mean, and this is another thing actually I learned from Matt Ferr's podcast, the Smoking Tire podcast, is, even like he's heard that like the people that own Singer, the Porsche 911, modifiers of the vintage Porsches, is like, apparently there's like people that are just like, I like what you're doing here, but I want to tack another 100 grand on. How do I make it 100 grand more expensive than my buddy's Singer? Like that kind of stupid stuff goes on all the time in the rich people circles of just like, I just want to say this is worth more. How can I justify that? What can you do to what can you put in this car to make it 100 grand more expensive so that I can brag? And it's, so there's even just some of that, but I think, Maybach, it's just a badge, and it is, slightly nicer. There's a little more customization. You can get the two-tone paint jobs and, there's a little more to it. You can probably commission more stuff with them and stuff, but there's really, it's just, again, people who just have to have something better than an S class. And for some reason don't want to go up to a Rolls Royce or a Bentley or something actually properly exotic. Or just people who are, again, big Mercedes fans, and Maybach is good enough, and they don't need the Rolls or the Bentley, and they don't care about the one-upmanship, but they got to one up the S class. It is very fickle. I mean, this is why they don't sell a ton of Maybachs, but clearly it's enough of a business case because, again, it's easy to do. You put a two-tone paint job and some nicer leather and a different grill and sell it for another 100 grand. I mean, that's a worthwhile business venture if there's actually people willing to, bite for that. But yeah, it is a fascinating dynamic. Luke says, my Maverick got pushed now to March 7th to the March 13th. I'm tired of waiting. I can relate. The Mach-E was, just waiting and waiting and waiting as well whenever we were waiting for that. So I understand. It's no fun, especially when you're excited about it and you're, wanting to, and you need a car, you're looking for a car, whatever, I get it. So that sucks. I hope it comes a little sooner. Sometimes they are overly conservative, sometimes of pushing stuff back and then being like, oh, wait. And then it actually shows up and surprises you. So maybe there will be some of that, but hopefully it comes sooner rather than later. Best of luck. At least it seems like it's pretty close, so you don't have much longer to wait here. But I know that's got to be tough. And let me see. Where are we? Harsha says, what is the worst three-row SUV you've ever experienced? Personally, for me, it's a second-gen MDX with 7 people. SUVs, no matter which one, are not good. I don't know. I mean, I've loaded some up with 7 people, and obviously it's not super comfortable still for most of them, but it's, they drive. Most of the ones that I've experienced drive fine, as long as it's not underpowered. But I mean, worst three-row SUV I've experienced. I don't know. I mean, they're all, nothing jumps out at me as like being like, oh, that was a bad one. They're all fine, in my experience. Some obviously are better than others, but as far as like one that really stands out as being horrible, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm sure there's probably something. If I listed them all out, I could probably be able to tell you like which one of these I like the least, but I don't remember any of them like really letting me down badly. So yeah, second gen MS and MDX. I've driven them. Yeah, they're fine. I mean, the V6 is good. And I did review one, I think, a while back, a long time ago, obviously when they were new. But yeah, I didn't. The only thing about second gen MDX I didn't like was the infotainment was, crap, but that was really it. Otherwise, everything seemed fine from a driving standpoint personally. But I don't think that one I loaded up with 7 people. but yeah, if I have a better answer, I'll let you know soon. But for right now, I don't have anything off the top of my head. Sean says, my first real car was an 86 Trans Am, and my parents used to drive me around in an old Nova as a baby, where my car seat was a bungee corded in because it didn't have back seat belts. Man, yeah, that's different time. That's funny. And awesome first car too. That was quite the achievement to have an 86 Trans Am for a first car. So kudos to you. That was probably, I'm sure, a fun experience. And Justin, thanks so much for being a member for 30 months now. Also coming up on that 3-year mark here pretty soon. He says, hey man, have you ever driven a Kia Borrego? I saw one today and they're such interesting vehicles. I've never driven one. I've never even sat in one. But yeah, that's one of those vehicles that I think really it came out at the exact wrong time. The recession and everything, high gas prices and all that really kind of killed that thing really fast. Obviously, if that had been put out even 5 years later, probably would have done a lot better. But yeah, it's a cool idea. And I always thought that was the name they were going to bring back for, the 3-row that ended up, eventually being Telluride. Obviously, I think Telluride, they knocked it out of the park, and the name, is certainly nice, and maybe even a little bit better than the Borrego. But yeah, they're rare, but every once in a blue moon, I will see one, and it's always like, oh yeah, that existed. That was fun. But let me see here. Where were we? Let me see. I think we are getting caught up on member questions pretty decently well here, so we can probably try and start getting to some of the non-members soon. But Harsha says, did you see the Nissan Altima banger race where they took them and raced them for fun? No rules or safety protocols whatsoever. A ton of fun. I didn't see that. That sounds like a good formula, though. That kind of thing. When we're talking about like non-serious motorsport, I think that could definitely be, some good YouTube content for sure. That's I'll have to check that out. I think I might have heard about that in passing, but I didn't watch it or see anything about that. But I'll definitely have to check that out. ICB Mitchell also says 0-60 testing originated with Road and Track magazine. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that, B Mitchell. Let me see. Jordan says Waymo self-drive taxi vehicles seem to be Jaguar F-Pace. Is that car no longer available to the public? Haven't heard anything about the F or E-Pace in a while besides Waymo. Well, the Waymo cars, I believe, are I-Pace, which was the electric one. I haven't seen an F-Pace. Maybe you just said the wrong letter. F-Pace, they all kind of blend together at some point. But so yeah, I-Pace is out of production. I can't remember if it was a year or two ago they got rid of it, I think, finally. But yeah, it's supposedly like actually a decent car in those last couple of years, because I mean those Waymos have a ton of miles and I don't see a ton of them, broken down or anything. It is fun. I mean, I was in San Francisco, was it last year, beginning of 2024, something like that. It was kind of crazy. And also I was in Phoenix and there was a bunch of them running around there and like seeing, these driverless things with like nobody, like there's not even anyone in the front seat anymore. Like it used to be you had someone monitoring, but like now they're truly like nobody in the car aside from whoever's in the back seat, and they're doing their thing and going around. And I also like Waymo's swagger that like Tesla just is talking about this on and on and on. And then Waymo's actually doing like a ton of rides pretty reliably, pretty safely, with real self-driving stuff. And I mean, there's been a few glitches and, there's been plenty of, snafus along the way, but like, it seems like they're actually they're out there, they're doing it every day, hour after hour, giving people rides in these things. So I think they're actually making some real progress there in a, again, safe manner, and doing it, again, baby steps and all this, instead of just being like, hey, here's some beta software, good luck, and throwing it on the American public. So yeah, I think they're pretty cool. Stud Muffin, thanks so much for another super chat. He says, congrats on the new car, Matt, and I hope you tap into your inner Italian now. Also, what are your thoughts on Mercedes focusing on combustion engines? Yeah, I feel like I'm going to do some more Italian jokes with the Fiat at some point. because it's been a bunch of fun this week. Again, everyone joking around, all my friends and family with nicknames for the car and stuff. But as far as thoughts on Mercedes focusing on combustion engines, they did say, yeah, there's that new V8 coming, which is great. But then they also, said in their timeline how there's a bunch of the electric stuff coming, and they also do really good plug-in hybrids too, with like the GLC plug-in hybrid doing like 50 some miles of electric range, which I think is actually the most in North America right now. So I think this is what I loved about Toyota. I've said this about Toyota for the past 5 years. I'm like, this is the way you do it. You have the gas for the people that, just it doesn't fit their life to do anything electrified. You have the hybrid for people that, don't have any moral objections to electrification, but just can't plug in, but want that extra efficiency. You have the hybrids for them. You got the plug-in hybrids for people who can plug in and want that, and they're ready for that, but they need the gas backup. And then you have the EVs for people who, are ready to make that leap. Meet people where they are. And, and I think that's the smart way to do it. And I think Mercedes is following that kind of theory of like, we got the V8s for people that are never going to buy an AMG unless it has a V8, and that market's not going to change. So let's quit trying to talk them into a 4-cylinder plug-in hybrid and instead just give them a V8. I feel like it doesn't hurt their CAFE. I mean, again, that's something we don't have to worry about anymore. But even in Europe, it doesn't really hurt their averages, I don't think, a whole lot, just because, again, these aren't high volume cars, so I feel like, a fairly low risk, low harm kind of thing, so I'm excited to see the V8 come back, and it's going to be supposedly this flat plane crank one, like we saw in the AMG GT Black, which, I mean, flat plane crank V8, like, amazing. So that'll be great to see. And again, love to see they just said this past week they started testing a solid state battery in a vehicle on the road. This isn't just lab stuff. We're actually driving a car powered by a solid state battery now with Mercedes, which is huge. So they're really doing some cool advancements there. And so I think they're doing great. I mean, I wish Mercedes had, better styling. I wish that they had some better quality. And, I have a lot of complaints with Mercedes, so I'm not going to be a cheerleader for them, until they actually improve their products. But they are really, doing some cool stuff, I think, as far as the R&D and what their direction is. And I think it's a great direction. And I think you're going to see a lot of other companies kind of do the same thing of being like, okay, we've figured out that, like, everyone's not just going to walk straight into an EV for their next car. We got to do something, that, fits people's lifestyles wherever they're at. And I think that's what you're going to see from most companies, especially, again, with loosening regulations. These companies all still want to go towards electrification, but they realize, they got to do other stuff as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how things play out, but I hope, I wish Mercedes all the best. They didn't have a great year this past year. So I hope things get better for them soon. And thanks so much, again, Said Muffin, for the super chat there. I'm going to get a drink while I look for my next question here. So let me see. So I see Truck and Car Guy talking about the I-Paces there as well. And Austin says, hey, Matt, is Beth concerned with the growing attention you'll receive from the ladies now that you're rocking the 500E? That's good. Yeah, I don't think she's worried in the slightest about that. And yeah, she actually just did a quick little ride last night. This was her first time riding in it. And she was like, what? There's no heated seats in here. And she was, just joking around about it. And again, we're all joking about the spicy meatball and, all the other nicknames. But yeah, it's she did say today, she's like, oh, it's cute. Don't you think it's cute? And I'm like, yeah, it's a cute, fun little thing. It puts a smile on my face. And it's just... it's going to be fun for the next 3.5 years. So yeah, but she's giving me plenty of crap. Don't worry. She's definitely, getting the jabs in as well, all in good fun. And let me see. Austin says the only attention I get in the 500 Abarth is from other guys. Well, that is true of like most cars. That's, I think, the biggest misconception about sporty vehicles. I mean, I'm not going to claim to be any kind of, expert on dating or anything like that. I was not very popular with the ladies, for all my single years, but that's what I've noticed. Even whenever I had all my friends with supercars and stuff, and we ride around their Lamborghinis and McLarens, all that stuff all the time. you're exciting teenage boys. That's the people that get excited about that. There are, some ladies that understand that expensive car means you have lots of money, and it's really just the money thing that I think is the attractive thing. But you can get that again just by rolling up in a Maybach or getting that by rolling up in a Rolls Royce. I don't think there's that many, ladies that aren't into cars already that are like, ooh, that's a fast car and like it for that reason. It's that it's expensive typically is, at least what I've gathered again. I'm sure your mileage will vary, of course, but that's kind of been my takeaway. Um, and yeah, it's always, all the times I would run around and we'd be out, till midnight, and Lamborghinis and all this stuff. It was, very rarely, ladies. If it was, that was, gold diggers anyway, for the most part. It's not like you're attracting people that like you for your personality. But anyway, TFIPW, thank you so much for being a member for 6 months now. He says, hi, Matt, longtime listener, first time caller. I'm getting a rental car next week, and I'm hoping Enterprise gives me the shittiest car on the lot. Well, good news for you. I believe you're either a Mirage fan or owner. I can't remember which one it is exactly. But first off, thanks for first time, member question there. As far as rental cars there, I will say, and I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but whenever I picked up the Fiat, I had that Nissan Sentra rental car. They had a purple Mirage sitting right next to it. And I was like, man, I could have finally done the Mirage video if I had just not rented a compact and rented like the economy or whatever below it. They actually had a Mirage on the lot there to rent people. And I could have finally done my Mirage video, but maybe I will go back and just rent it for a few hours and do that. And but yeah, so if you did the cheapest thing, you may actually get a Mirage, which sounds like it'd be just great for you. But honestly, they're all 2025s for the most part. And I mean, in all seriousness, I actually really like Enterprise. No paid sponsorship here, but I mean, they've always been my go-to rental place, and they've always treated me very well. So, best of luck with the rental there, though, and I hope that you get some truly terrible pile so that you can report back next week on your glee that you've experienced from having the worst car possible. I'm curious what they give you. And see, Truck and Car Guy says, I can tell you all about Enterprise. Maybe you've got a different experience, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Truck and Car Guy. And let me see here. Other questions. So Austin's running a Brianna says, did Mac get a new car, a Fiat? Yeah, the 500e. The video went live there on Thursday, Brianna, if you want to check it out. And Michelle says, thoughts on Maserati Grecale. One of my relatives picked one up this weekend. GT trim replaces their Alfa Stelvio lease that came to an end. Nice. That's a nice little upgrade. I've never driven a Grecale. I don't. I mean, I've heard about them, and I've seen some stuff in passing, but I haven't experienced one, and I haven't even really read any reviews on them to see what other people think. I think the consensus that I've seen from others is that it's a nice Macan impersonation, but it's not as good as a Macan, and people just get a Macan instead. Is kind of, again, the consensus I got. But for everyone who doesn't want to have another Macan, if you live in a place where they're a dime a dozen, the Grecale stands out, and it's different, and also might have a better lease deal too. So yeah, I'm not sure what kind of deal they were able to swing on theirs, but that's cool they got, and congrats to them. And yeah, it's I just have no idea, and I've asked for one in the past, and they haven't had them in the fleet, at least that I've seen. So I'll keep asking though, and see if I do get a chance to try one out. I'm curious myself. And Austin says, I'm late. Did we already discuss the $3,000 off Costco deal on top of 10 grand dealer discounts on C8 Corvettes? We have not. I didn't hear about that. But that's great. A 10 grand off C8s. That's, why is there, I mean, maybe they've just finally sold every C8 fan a C8 already, and now there's not a lot of sales or a lot of interest in them. I don't know. That's interesting. That sounds like a phenomenal deal. I mean, I love base C8. It's still great. It's, it's not as engaging, I would say, as C7, just because, under 500 horsepower mid-engine thing is a very safe feeling car, and the way they tuned it is very safe, very fast, still very fun. Very exotic feeling in a lot of ways too. Great car, but I think that was my one thing is like I couldn't kick the back end out in a C8 really at all in a base C8 versus C7. It was you could drift that thing around all day without even trying. At least as far as not drifting it well, but you can kick the back end out very easily. And that was my only thing. But I mean, if you can get a C8 for 13 grand off between Costco and dealer discounts, that's a good deal. I mean, I'd have to, again, do my deep dive analysis of like what else is available at that price tag. But that's tough to argue against. I think that's a solid deal, especially if you go for a low spec Corvette. Then you're getting a nice, actually pretty low price point. That could make a lot of sense. With 13 grand off, you're talking about some fully loaded 100 grand C8, and that's where it's like 13 grand. Who cares? But for the lower ones, that's a nice discount for sure. And Luke says Mitsubishi Outlander ? I'm not sure the question there, Luke, but I mean Outlander's good. I had the plug-in hybrid one, like a year and a half ago. Really liked it. Haven't driven the regular one. But yeah, I love the plug-in hybrid. It actually is my favorite handling vehicle in that segment, honestly, and was really impressed with the interior. And I think it's way easier to get than a RAV4 Prime. So if you're not up for the colossal headache of trying to wrangle one of those primes, I think the Outlander is a great second runner up, and I think it's a little more fun to drive than the Hyundai and Kia plug-in hybrids. And yeah, I think Outlander's underappreciated, at least for the plug-in hybrid. The regular one might be kind of lukewarm, but I think the plug-in hybrids are actually really well done. And Jordan says, I think the Honda Sony project is going to flop. Thanks for the live tonight, Matt. Absolutely. Thanks for stopping by, Jordan. And yeah, it's sad. They screwed up the pricing on that car. They needed it to be like half of that price tag if they wanted to, have it sell well, or they needed to make it a whole lot more impressive if they're going to try and charge Lucid Air prices for that thing. Because no one's taking that over Lucid Air. Even if you're a Sony fan, I can't imagine someone who has every Sony product ever made. I still don't think even they're going to go for that thing for 100 grand. We'll see what happens. Might see some real fire sales on those things too, or they might just even, cut it off before it even actually reaches dealers, or I guess direct to sale, or whatever they're going to do with that. But yeah, it's a shame how that whole thing fell apart. It had a lot of promise, I think. And Chad says, I'd love to see one of the van racing series in real life. I haven't seen a van series, but that'd be fun if there was one. Maybe there is something I'm unaware of, but yeah, any kind of hilarious racing. I mean, that's part of what, the Top Gear stuff was so fun when they'd, soup up these RVs and do all kinds of goofy stuff. I think that's the kind of stuff that would, definitely get a lot of viewership these days. And Austin says, I agree, Jordan. Afila seems overpriced and not offering much to differentiate from other vehicles. To be honest, also a weird name. I agree. Just, wrong in all the ways for that thing. Just every step of the way, they made the wrong choice, sadly. So yeah, don't have a lot of hope for that one. And Harsha says, if you get the beige 500E, or if you got the beige 500E, you could have called it Luigi from Cars, right? That'd be fun. Yeah, I forgot about that too. Yeah, that's Luigi now has a loaded name, but but that would have been fun. Yeah, to do that. And Austin says, my friend has a Tesla. He has been paying for full self-driving. He told me he's canceling it because it keeps getting worse and worse. Interesting. Yeah, I know. I think Harsha actually, he uses it in traffic and likes the experience for him. And I think, in certain cases it might be okay, but that's interesting to hear that it's worse for them. I mean, I've seen all the terrible stuff that it's done, driving down one-way streets the wrong way and pulling out in front of people, and like that Cybertruck that, just drove into the side of the road and just kind of, I think, drove itself into a bunch of signs or something. I don't know what they drove into, but it was just And the owner was like impressed with the safety while their car drove them off the side of the road. Yeah, Austin, I see, says the same thing about dual meaning for Luigi there. And Chad says, quick rant because I drive a lot daily. Why do lifted trucks and SUVs love hanging out in the far left lane of the interstate? I get it, you're right, can do its thing off road, but we're here now. Right. Yeah. So like, why are they hogging? I mean, I think left lane hogs are one of the biggest problems on highways, obviously. And, um, you know, I mean, I think I see it with a bunch of cars. It doesn't even matter what it is. And I think, there's a variety of reasons. I could go on a probably 30-minute monologue about why, there's left lane hogs and why they're annoying and, why they exist. But I think, you know, the stuff that I've seen as far as my own personal experiences with left lane hogs is there's two camps of people. There's either people that are truly oblivious that like don't understand that everyone's passing them on the right and flipping them off because they're in the left lane. And then there's the people who feel entitled to use whatever lane they feel like it, and everyone else can kick rocks. And it's either one or the other that I've noticed, and not to stereotype, but people in lifted trucks probably aren't the oblivious type. They are the kick rocks type. And so I think, it's truly just like, I can do whatever I want. Who are you going to be to say otherwise, make me, get out of the left lane, that kind of stuff, that mentality, just the attitude, I think is, why some of them do it. But yeah, it's just left lane, and this is one of the reasons why I'm fully in support of autonomous cars, because if every non-enthusiast just were sitting in the right hand lane in autonomous pods staring at their phones, great, get them out of the way, have them all go in the slow lane, and then have everyone else that actually is interested in driving can enjoy the rest of the lanes and hopefully have less congestion on the roadways. But I'm assuming those lifted truck buyers certainly wouldn't be in autonomous pods, but at least, you have less people to dodge around. And, if everyone else is off in the right lane, then you can get around those lifted trucks a little bit easier. And the good news is you can always outmaneuver a lifted truck because they are, they might act like they can drive fast, but those things have the handling characteristics of a hockey puck, and so, I mean, there's no grip with all those stupid tires they put on these, huge wheels, and those suspensions that, are basically a wooden wagon wheel kind of suspension. I mean, it's like, there's nothing there to, give you any kind of stability. So it's just like, this is why you see them all toppled over all the time. And it's anyway, yeah, I agree with you. It's super annoying for sure. And this is why I'm all for all these driver assistance systems that can intelligently change lanes and intelligently get you out of the way. Shred Car Guy says Matt is not wrong. One of the cheapest options they have indeed is a Mirage at Enterprise. Let me see. There's some discussion there about Enterprise. Harsha says, do you feel safe in your 500 on a journey home while next to massive SUVs? In my small venue, I'm being blown around like a kite due to the airstream from bigger vehicles. So that was actually one of my potential holdups with the 500. And after doing that highway drive home, I actually felt better about it than I thought I was going to. I think the main reason why is that the 500, you sit up pretty high, and it's not a sporty vehicle. I mean, I'm sitting up way higher than any small sporty actual sports car. Like, I mean, I am head and shoulders higher than I am in a Miata or a GR86 or something like that, where those cars, especially Miata, I do feel a little vulnerable, honestly, in something like that as on the highway. But the 500 is up so high, and it's weird, but because you're sitting up high, it doesn't feel as small as it is from behind the wheel, to me at least. And I don't feel like I'm driving around in some little beer can. Like, it actually feels like I'm in a real car out on the road, fairly eye to eye, at least with the average sedans and stuff out there. And maybe it's because of the extra weight. I mean, it's not like it's super heavy. They're still like right at just under 3,000 pounds for the 500E. But, that battery pack, the stability there of that, low center of gravity and the, slight bit of extra weight. I mean, it weighs, even though it's a tiny little, meatball, it weighs as much as a Honda Civic. So I feel like, yes, there's a shorter wheelbase there to contend with, but I don't feel like I was blown around on the highway. Obviously, yes, I am aware I'm in a tiny car, and so when I'm next to 18 wheelers and stuff, I am a little extra self conscious that I am a little more vulnerable here. But again, I feel safe in it just because of all the safety stuff. It did phenomenal in the Euro NCAP crash tests in Europe. It's got 10 airbags. Again, physics is still going to be physics, and you can 3,000 pounds still isn't that much compared to most other stuff on the road these days. But at least I feel like I have the same kind of chances as a Honda Civic, which millions of people are driving around in, not being worried about the size of their car. So I feel fairly safe in it. Again, it's not going to be a highway road tripper. Most likely, we will see. I may actually put more highway miles on it than I was planning, depending on how this year goes and how confident I am in air travel, which right now I am not confident at all. And this may be the year of the road trip for me until the FAA and air travel gets its stuff figured out. Still the safest way to travel, but I'm just a little iffy about it. So I'm opting to do more road trips this year. So I may drive the Fiat a little bit more on the highway, but hopefully I'll just be able to do mostly press cars if I do a lot of these road trips here this year. But yeah, I feel fairly safe in it though. And Jordan says, what would it take for Ford to bring back the Focus and Fusion as sufficient hybrid since EV adoption is in question? Charging infrastructure redacted. I mean, I wouldn't worry about I wouldn't agree that EV adoption is in question. It's still going to happen. It's just going to be a little bit of a slower pace, possibly. The charging infrastructure hasn't been redacted by anyone except the federal government, which was a tiny sliver of the actual amount of chargers out there or being put out there. It's all the large players that are still putting in chargers every day because they're making money off of them. EVgo, Electrify America, they got some help and subsidies from the government, but I haven't heard any plans changing. They're still putting up these chargers. There's still these alliances with these car companies subsidizing a lot of this stuff as well. So there is a bunch of that support. But as far as what would it take for Ford to bring back the Focus and Fusion, it would take new management. That's what it would take. It would take people that, don't think that sedans are, a drag, and people who actually, think Ford can offer more than just trucks and SUVs. And, Jim Farley's an enthusiast, but he's not, he's not willing to do that anymore, unfortunately. And there was just, I can't remember who I was talking. There was someone who was just telling me about how they're so upset about how there's no, it was the Tiffany Dell podcast. And he's upset about how Ford's getting rid of they already got rid of the Fiesta. Focus is going away this year. And those were top sellers in the UK. And they're literally just killing off some of their top sellers there. And then wondering why, their sales and their finances are horrible in Europe. And it's, I don't know. So it would take some better management, honestly, or just, I don't know, some other component. I don't think it's an issue of the cars or an issue of hybrid tech or powertrains. It's just a matter of Ford thinking that it's not worth selling sedans to people anymore. Yeah. Anyway, Jordan also says, I'm watching live on my T-Mobile network and Chad is watching on Wi-Fi. Hope it helps the YouTube algorithm. I appreciate that. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, the viewership's always been really, pretty reliable on these live streams, but just, the growth is just something that, it just doesn't happen here, and that's okay, but maybe it will someday. We'll see. But I think we have fun here either way. And let me see. Chad says, I think it's crazy how there's so many people in our area towing with Raptors and Rhinos on the regular. You bought the wrong truck, right? Yeah, not the towing ones of the bunch if you're going for an F-150 or a Ram, but yeah. And Austin says, yep, driving the Fiat 500 is like driving a tiny minivan. Okay, so I'm not the only one with this opinion. I'm glad you agree, Austin. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, it is. It does feel bigger than it is, and in a good way. And then whenever you want it to feel small in parking spots and stuff, it does. So it is kind of the best of both worlds in that way. And he says, I daily my 500 on the highway, and it does great. That's awesome. And Austin also says Ford needs a new CEO. Matt is having to compete with the Oscars tonight. That's true. Yeah, I didn't look at the calendar to see what was going on. Not sure how much overlap there is with enthusiasts and Oscars, but yeah. Yeah, this might be a little bit of a challenge here, but it's all good. And Vishal says, why is it that people feel safer in SUVs and trucks versus sedans and other smaller cars? I think a lot of it is just being up higher. If you feel like you've got the high ground and you are above other people physically, then you feel like you are less touchable and safer. Also, when you're next to 18 wheelers and stuff, they're up super high, and so the closer you can get to equivalency there, I think helps some people mentally, even if there's if there isn't any real safety advantages there. I mean, and typically SUVs and trucks are heavier, and so physics comes into play in an accident. And so if you have more weight on your side, in many cases that is an advantage. Now there's other cases where the weight does work against you, for example against guardrails. The heavier the vehicle, the more likely you are to blow through that guardrail and have it not do its job. Same thing, if you're crashing into stationary objects, it's worse in a heavier vehicle than it is in a lighter one. So there are some exceptions to that rule, but typically, again, when people think about safety, they think about car to car interaction, and in that case it's an arms race of who's got the biggest car. They're going to be the safest person. And I mean, we're familiar with this in America with, guns or whatever. It's who's got the bigger one. They're gonna have the top spot there. So that's, I think, a lot of it for sure. And also, the mentality, that Subaru and others pushed of, well, you need to have all-wheel drive to be safely driving in snow and all these other things. That is more typically an SUV and truck kind of thing versus sedans. Which were more recently all-wheel drive outside of Subaru, so there's some of that too that plays into it for sure. And let me see. We can get back to some non-member questions here. So Kermit says, looking to buy an 18 EcoBoost with about 50,000 miles on it for 22.2K. First sports car. I know it gets hate. Bad idea. I mean, I like my EcoBoost. And there was someone else, I don't know if it was you or someone else, but someone else also just asked about getting an EcoBoost, and people were giving them crap in the comments. And I was like, EcoBoosts are great. I like the EcoBoost. I enjoyed mine. Again, I kind of got in my head about the reliability, but by 18, they had worked out a lot of the kinks. They actually had that revised motor in 18, which was even better. And then, yeah, I mean, time has shown now over the past 10 years of EcoBoost being out there in the world, they do some pretty high miles. And they're still direct injected, and there can be some little issues there, but overall they're pretty solid vehicles. And so it's a great entry into Mustangs. It's a great entry into sports cars like you're after there. And I think it's great. And also, yeah, you get hate, but don't worry about that. You're buying a car for you. You're the one living with it. You're the one that's driving it. Everyone else can have their opinions, but they're not living with it, so it doesn't matter what they think, and so if you like it, get it for you. I love EcoBoost. They're great. Now, sure, you could make the argument, go a few years older and get a GT for the same money. And, I don't know what a 2015 or 2016 GT is going for. Obviously, there's the fuel costs are going to be higher, and the insurance costs are going to be higher, and all that as well. So there's two sides to every coin here, but I mean, I like the EcoBoost, and if it fits what you're looking for, whether it's the fuel economy or just again lower insurance rates, whatever the case is, EcoBoost is great. And it's still 300 horsepower or whatever. I mean, it's a punchy little thing. And they're really good cars. So great daily drivers, comfortable, great road trippers, pretty practical, and I love my Mustangs. I had them again for 10 years, basically, between the four of them. And they're great cars. So I don't know about the price. I'd have to look at, what other ones are out there and what the condition of that one is to really give you a, super precise response about the value of that one in particular for that money. Yeah, that's the only part I couldn't say, but yeah, hopefully it works out for you. And again, definitely don't worry about what other people say. Everyone's got an opinion about everything, and everyone's going to tell you, regardless of what car you get, you did something wrong. I mean, I got plenty of it for the Fiat 500, of course, but I got it for the Mustangs. I got it for every single car I bought, and everyone else can probably relate. You're always going to have haters. So don't worry about that. Let me see. Truck Car Guy says, at the rate the vehicles are going, soon you'll have to have a CDL to drive an SUV. I mean, we already have transmissions with 10 forward gears, right? I mean, but we definitely won't have any CDLs, that's for sure. Because if one thing's for certain, the past 50 years have shown there's no interest in any kind of, increases in licensing difficulty. If you got a pulse, you can get a license, and you can be guaranteed the next 4 years, there's not going to be any regulation on anything. So, we're definitely not going to see it anytime here in the 2020s. But yeah, it'd be nice to see some extra licensing. And there's been people discussing the idea of proposing, legislation that once you get to a certain weight limit for these EVs in particular, or even heavy duty trucks, that you should have something there, or at least an extra training course, or some kind of PowerPoint slide you have to go through to say, yes, I understand I'm driving a gigantic Hummer EV that's 9,000 pounds, and that this thing is actually dangerous if I am stupid with it. But it's a lost cause in America. We don't take safety on roads seriously like other countries do for the most part. So it's one of the hazards of driving in America, living in America. Chad says, have you heard anything about the Genesis Coupe lately? No, I don't think there's really going to be, anything outside of the Genesis X concepts, if that's what you're referring to. I haven't heard anything in over a year, I feel like, at this point. I think the last thing I heard was one of the dealers said they saw it at a dealer convention, and they said people are going to be trading in their Bentleys for it, which was hilarious. And you can tell that guy has clearly drank the, Genesis Kool-Aid there. But, I think, it sounds like it's something they're probably going to do. And it probably will be high end, but I don't think it's going to cost Bentley money. And even if it does, it's going to have to be really impressive, or just be, again, for those diehard people that don't want a Bentley for whatever reason. But yeah, it'll be cool, and I hope they do actually come out with that. But I have not heard anything recently about that. Vishal says, I do appreciate sitting higher up in an SUV, but I just prefer a sedan. I feel the seating position is a bit more comfortable in a sedan. I agree with that. Yeah, but yeah, a lot of people, it's just, again, they like that reassurance. And Jordan, thank you for a super chat. He says, when the BS settles, Honda will own Nissan. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I don't know what to believe anymore about that whole thing. I mean, it sounds like, the Nissan board is really considering getting rid of the CEO. And I think I've heard that the CEO has said he will step down if asked to. So, it's possible, but, is it still going to be Honda, or is it going to be somebody else, or, what's going to happen? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the rumors are suggesting that, like, Nissan's, pitching themselves to Tesla and all this other stuff. I mean, I don't really believe that actually even happened, but if it did, I don't think that would actually go through. But I don't know what's going to happen. It's just, thankfully, it's for the automotive industry and automotive news, it is the gift that keeps on giving. That's for sure, with lots of good, interesting headlines. But yeah, thank you so much, Jordan, for the super chat. And let me see. Steven says, I don't recall if in your video, but if the Fiat did not go through, what was the runner-up car you were eyeing for? I didn't really cover that, so that's a good question. There was really nothing else that was really getting to my price point. So honestly, if I hadn't, it almost didn't happen with the Fiat. If they weren't able to get to my price point, I just wouldn't have gotten anything. It was really like there was nothing else that was getting close to that. The Hyundais were, again, the one that I really would have liked the most, the Ioniq 6. But that's just, no one was getting those things cheap enough. The lowest I found for a 0 down sign and drive with taxes and fees included, which really does drive that price up by sometimes like $50 a month or something. That was, I think like 230, I think maybe was the lowest, and it's $100 more than I'm doing on the Fiat, and I just wouldn't have been able to justify it. So, it really, as I continued to like dig and dig and dig, I realized like it really was just going to end up being Fiat or nothing. And so I'm glad it worked out. But it almost, I was getting pretty close to throwing in the towel, because I was just so tired of, so many of these dealers. Like it really was a good reminder for me of the hassle some people go through if you actually are trying to get a good deal. And this is why I understand why a lot of people don't push that hard, and they just go to their local dealer, because if you don't mind spending the extra money, certainly is far easier. Go to the local dealer. Everyone's friendly. No one gets upset. You don't have to haggle or twist anybody's arm. You walk in, you say, yes, 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 I'll pay that. You sign, you walk out the door, and the dealer's grinning from ear to ear, and you at least had an easy day, and it was stress free. But so I mean, that's why, I mean, it was a month and a half of calling around, dealing with idiots on the phone, and dealing with people who just didn't care because they knew they weren't getting paid off this deal. It was a you know no, I mean, all these people were losing money on these things, so it was definitely a struggle, but I think it was worth it in the end. But yeah, there was really, again, it was those were really the top ones. I shopped a bunch of stuff though. I looked into, Honda Prologue, Super Solterra, the Chevys, the Equinox, Blazer. Again, I didn't care as long as it was cheap. And again, it's a lot of these companies also advertise these low rates, and then a lot of them I called them and I'm like, hey, like your website, not even manufacturer website, but like dealer site says this fin is this amount of money with this much down, and they're like, well, actually, you're gonna put it down like another $2,000 and this, that, and the other. Plus, it doesn't cover taxes and fees and all that stuff, which they say in the fine print, which I knew, but like I didn't think it was gonna inflate the thing that much. And then it's like, well, you guys are saying this is, $150 a month or whatever, and then but once it's all said and done, it ends up being super expensive anyway, in my mind, for my budget. And so it just, there was a whole lot of that too, of just being like, you said this, and then it ended up not being that exciting. And there was also some, like one of the Fiat dealers there in Virginia, they had like 10 500Es rotting on lots. Like all of them have pictures from like the summer, and no one has touched a single one of them. And I'm like, come on, guys, you got 10 of these things. Surely you have some motivation to like just dump one of these things for nothing. Just like, get it off your lot. Surely there's some pressure here, but like the amount of dealers that are just like completely content to have these things just rot on their lots. They're like, yeah, well, sorry, like best we can do is $250 a month. And that was it. And I mean, sometimes there's a sucker that comes in and will pay whatever. And actually, this is one of the things I ran into with one of the other dealers. I was talking to him, and he was very frank and open with me, and was just like, look, he's like, I don't know what we're gonna do with these things. He's like, maybe we'll have these 2024s into 2026, and maybe they'll sit here for another year. Maybe they won't. He's like, I don't know. He's like, but this is the lowest we can go. For them, it was 175. They're like, and that's it. And then, some of the dealers also, I had been talking with them long enough that like some of them got lucky and they got a sucker to come in and pay. And like, then I called the one dealer up and they're like, oh, we just had someone that just agreed to $250 a month for one. I'm like, well, that's good for them. But like, just because they're paying $250 doesn't mean that's what I'm going to pay, or that's what these things are worth to everybody else. And so I think a lot of them truly are hoping for the random, person to walk in that really loves it, or doesn't know how to negotiate but wants the car, or whatever the case is, and pays whatever they're asking, and that's the end of it. But I think more and more of them are figuring out this is going to be a tough sell, and they've been sitting on them since the summer, and they just finally have to just kind of come to grips with the reality that like they're not going to get sticker price for this thing. And so that was it was a journey. It really was a journey. But yeah, long answer, sorry. But that was the whole thought process there. And let me see. Truck and Car Guy says, I felt for a long time that driving standards need to be tightened up. It's hard not to think that when you drive something like a big rig and see the stupidity around you. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, you see all kinds of stuff. I mean, yeah, the amount of people that pull in front of 18-wheelers and like basically brake check them. It's like, are you trying to get yourself killed? Like, are you trying? It's yeah, it is definitely baffling for sure. Vishal says, did you see that the 2026 RAV4 was spy testing in Japan? I actually saw some spy shots, in the past couple of months here of RAV4. And yeah, I'm guessing we'll see it. Yeah, we should see it at some point this year. I'm not sure when. I know nothing about it, and I don't, I would have to think I know last gen debuted around the fall time. Excuse me. So maybe it'll be something, in the fall. We get, Toyota likes to do debuts at the LA Auto Show sometimes. So, that would be my best guess, but I don't know. Yeah, it's not coming super soon. That's because it's not on my radar. So, I guess that's the only thing I can confirm. Or maybe I'm just not on the invite list. That's also possible, but I don't. I haven't heard anything about it, and yeah, but I'm curious, to see how they change it. Steven says, "Have you ever used the Turo app? If so, how was your experience?" I did. Actually rented a Tesla Model S back in 2019 on Turo, and I did a review on that car actually. So if you look at my review of the Tesla Model S from 2019, that was a Turo car, and it was a fine experience. The dude met us at the airport, gave me a crash course in it, in the in the pickup lane there for a minute or so, and that was about it. And it was fine. It was a completely fine experience. That was at this point, 6 years ago or so, but yeah, I've never used it since then, but it's a cool idea and it's a cool alternative. My problem with Turo, it's too expensive for most of this stuff. I mean, there's some savings to be had, but the ease of just going to your local rental desk, and a lot of times when I do rentals too, it's either high miles or it's one ways, and that Turo doesn't help me out with anything like that. So it's it's something that has a lot of value for me, but a lot of these things on Turo, it's still like you're driving a 5-year-old Grand Caravan for this, maybe $15 less than a brand new one at Enterprise or whatever. Like, there's some of them where just the pricing just seems not good to me. Maybe in other cities it's better, but here in Pittsburgh, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of great stuff. Now, if you could rent a car for 30 or 40 bucks a day, I can see it getting a lot more exciting, but a lot of the stuff, it's going to be expensive either way, and just not a super appealing proposition to me personally, but maybe it's better elsewhere. Harsha says, how come Lexus didn't make a bigger three-row SUV sooner when there was so much demand for one? I think, I think they initially underestimated the amount of demand. And I think they also were probably just, kind of having their hands tied with like not being able to justify doing this on their own at Lexus possibly. And, having to wait for the Toyota tie in and the Grand Highlander, that whole thing to, play out. And I also think part of them probably truly thought that RXL was good enough. And then they realized like, oh no, we need to go like way bigger. And that's why you see TX being like the biggest thing in its segment, basically from rear legroom standpoint. You can have basketball players sitting in the third row just fine in that, so I mean, I think it was them trying to kind of phone it in and cross that thing off their list, and then realizing, oh wait, this needs to be like an actual legit thing if we want to actually have a good response to it. And then they knocked it out of the park with TX, and now I don't know about you guys, but I see TXs everywhere. Even with like stop sale they had for months on end. They now they're back up and running, and people are snatching them up like there's no tomorrow. And Harsha said, what was the worst thing someone said you said to you when you were shopping around for cars? I mean, no one was like rude or anything. I will also add, I was kind of secret shopping it. I wasn't, I didn't mention, anything. And also for a lot of them, I didn't even mention the Stellantis connection of like, hey, I have a discount code here, until I knew they were serious with negotiating. Then I'd pull that card out and be like, oh, and by the way, I had this other little thing to knock an extra 5% off the MSRP there. But really the worst thing when I was shopping around was the dealer that kind of did a bait and switch kind of thing, where I've been talking to them for months. They slowly were getting down little by little to the lower price point. And then they called me on a Friday afternoon and said, okay, our manager wants to take one last swipe at this. I think we were at that point like 147 or 148 a month. He's like, okay, we're going to take one more crack at this. He's like, how about 120? And I was like, I'm pretty sure I will go for that. I'm like, let me think it over and I will let you know. And they had no conditions. They didn't, say anything. They're just like, how about 120? I said, give me give me the weekend to think about it. Or I didn't say give me the weekend. I just said, let me think about it. I will call you back, but I'm probably into that deal. And they were also in PA, so it would have been a little bit easier because I would have been able to just, have a plate versus right now I have this temp tag and I got to do the whole registration thing on my own. But, so I wanted to do it. And, but I was like, I want to just like, I wasn't totally sold on still getting a backup car at that point, because this was this point, like probably a month ago. As I was like, I just got to think this over a little bit. And then I called first thing Monday morning and said, okay, I'll do 120. And then they're like, actually, that deal was only during our auto show week, which ended on Saturday afternoon. And they called me on Friday afternoon. So literally it was like only open for 24 hours and they didn't tell me that. And the salesman apologized and said, I'm sorry, I didn't, I forgot to tell you that it was only good for 24 hours. But then they're like, but we'll do it for 147. I'm like, no, like I'm not doing that. He's like, well, we still think we have the lowest price. I'm like, you do, but it doesn't make me feel good that you had 120 in front of me and then you pulled it away from me. Like, regardless of what the price is or what the price is now, even if it's the cheapest thing at that point in time, I'm like, that doesn't make me feel good. So I'm like, either honor your offer and find the money somewhere else for the incentive for the auto show or whatever, or I don't want it. And that really soured me on that dealer. And for a while they still had the cheapest price, but I was like, I am not getting it from them because they're they either didn't communicate well enough if it is an honest mistake, and if it wasn't, then it's them back and forth jerking me around that I didn't appreciate. So I just kept being like, look, this other dealer's at 147. Here's how they did their deal. Can you copy it and beat it? And I did that to a bunch of places and kind of said, here's the homework already done for you. Can you beat it by a few bucks? And again, I got to a point finally where this one in Kentucky was like, oh yeah, like, and not only can we beat it, they could have actually probably sold me at like, 135, maybe even 140. But then he called me and he's the one who was like, oh, we'll do it for 130. And he's like, actually, if you pick it up, we'll do it for 128. And I was like, I can't pick it up from Kentucky. That would have been like a 450-mile drive in a car with 141 miles of range in the middle of winter. I don't have the kind of free time to burn on that. Even though it would have been a fun YouTube adventure. But so, we worked it out for 130 delivered to Ohio, and then I got it from there. But yeah, for a while there, it was like, yeah, that was the thing. I was like, I'm not going back to that dealer because I'm so mad that they offered 120 and then took it away. I mean, that still technically was the best deal, but it's just like, I wish I would have known it was for 24 hours. That was annoying, but that's it. And I see we have actually just crossed the 2-hour mark. So we'll do the last 3 questions here from members, and I might be trying to do 1 or 2 quick non-member ones before we go here, and then we'll sign off. But let me see. Linda says, let your daughter name your new car. I'll bet that she loves it. She does love it. And yeah, she hasn't offered any names yet, but I'll ask her and see what she wants to call it. That's a fun idea. Thanks, Linda. Austin says, I might be tempted at the 500E fire sale. I always give 18-wheelers a wide berth. Yeah, I mean, see what the deals are like in your area, Austin. But if they're willing to deal, I think the key to 500E especially, the reason why Kentucky is the dealer that worked for me, was a lot of these dealers in places that are not friendly to EVs, where you don't have people that want EVs. No one in Kentucky, I think, wants an EV, and certainly not a 500E. They're feeling the pressure the most. If you go to a city, or you go to an area where 500E is probably better suited, and you have people that are open to the idea of a electric vehicle, and then one that's that low range, it's those dealers don't have as much pressure. And this is why the Pittsburgh area dealers, they know there'll be someone that picks one up, for a little city beater, and they'll get it eventually. But the guys in Kentucky, they might not ever get that sale unless they do an out-of-state deal like they did with me. So I think I don't know where you're at exactly, Austin. I don't remember. But again, if you're open, you have the free time, go to a very red state that doesn't like EVs in general anyway, and especially one that's not close to a city center. If they're in the middle of nowhere and all of them hate EVs anyway, they have a contempt for them, and they're more willing to take a loss and be like, oh, see these crappy EVs, I gotta take these huge losses. And they're willing, because they're already mentally in that spot of like, this is going to be a bad experience for them. And so how bad of an experience is less relevant at that point in time, because it's just like they just want it off their lot. It's just like a drag. And so that would be my suggestion. Go to a place that's unkind to EVs and get it there if you can. So that's my tip for getting a 500E deal for anyone else. And Sean says, hey, any chance you can review a Tesla Plaid or Lucid Sapphire? Would love to see your acceleration reaction. Lucid Sapphire, I'd love to. Lucid does provide press cars rarely. I haven't. They actually offered me an Air a couple of years ago. Back then, there was so little interest that I just didn't think it was worth my time, even though I would have personally enjoyed doing it. Just, whenever I think a car is going to get 5,000 views, I'm not going to bother with it, because I'm better off going to my local buddy's dealership and driving anything else on the lot and getting more views. So didn't take it up, but if the Sapphire gets offered to me, absolutely will do that one. As far as Tesla Plaid, I have no interest in reviewing a Tesla anytime in the foreseeable future, not with the way they are, really not in a good place as far as public perception. People are fire selling their, models, their Model 3s in particular, but I mean, all the Teslas, I mean, they're dumping them at, quick rates. There's protests outside Tesla dealers, these past couple of weeks. And so, I mean, I have no interest in weighing in on any Tesla. And it's not something I'm interested in doing there, but, Lucid Sapphires, I mean, Tesla Plaid, very impressive car. Again, just I don't want to have any kind of Tesla stuff on the channel right now. And Michelle says, I also got to poke around a Grand Highlander finally when I took our Highlander in for service last month. They did a really great job with the space, especially the third row and the cargo. Yeah, I agree. Really top notch. Luke says, I pointed out a hole in the leather seat of a used car and the salesman said it's used. It's not going to be perfect. Take it or leave it. Wow. I'd love to hear everyone else's horror stories from dealers. That's quite a claim, man. I did also, there was one dealer that got annoyed with me and they did actually say their best offer is $191 a month. And I'm like, look, there's someone else that's doing 175 at that point in the negotiations, which was true. There's two dealers doing 175. I'm like, I can get 175 down the street. You got to do better than 191. They're like, that's the deal. Take it or leave it. I'm like, okay, fine. And then I don't know, not a month, maybe like 2 weeks later, they emailed me again and were like, hey, just check in to see if you had done anything with those other dealers. I'm like, nope, still looking for a better deal. Let me know if you can beat it. And she's like, sorry, we can't. I'm like, well, obviously, then no, I'm not going to your deal. Like I, again, could have gotten 175 weeks ago. So yeah, and especially after giving me attitude with the take it or leave it line, I'm like, yeah, well, even if you were the cheapest, I would probably not go for it. But yeah, it's it's a very high burnout profession, car sales. It's a tough gig. But still, you got to try and at least fake it with people if you're going to try and make a sale. And Linda says 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds, quick off the line, 20 combined MPG and 34 on the highway, quick around town, around curves, sporty fun, drive perfect for me as far as her EcoBoost. So for the person asking earlier about EcoBoost impressions, Linda's got a Mustang EcoBoost and really loves it. So I agree, great cars. Austin says, thanks for the stream, Matt. Have a great week, everyone. I agree. Hope everyone has a great week. The one last question I see Josiah is asking my opinion on the current GTI versus Golf R. Prices are getting closer to each other now. Interesting. I didn't see they're getting closer to each other. It really comes down to your preferences there. I don't see the need for paying more for Golf R personally, because to me, like having all-wheel drive isn't the end-all be-all. GTI is fun enough. So for that, I mean, personally, if there's a significant price premium, I'd say get the GTI. If there's not much of a price premium and you're getting, way more horsepower and all-wheel drive for very little extra money, then, you're probably better off with the GTI, with the Golf R, unless you appreciate the lighter weight of the GTI and that additional agility of just not having, all the extra weight of the rear axle and all that stuff, the all-wheel drive system. If you're not, if you don't care about that stuff, or you want the better fuel economy with the GTI, there's other reasons there. But yeah, I guess it comes down to exactly what that price premium is. But if it's more than I guess on the used market, it's different. But, in the new market, I just tell people go for the GTI over the Golf R, unless, again, you have to have all-wheel drive. I think GTI is fun enough. But, on the used market, if it's pretty close pricing, then sure, get the extra power and, a little bit of a more advanced car for similar money, then I think Golf R can make sense there. And just like I said, base price on GTI is higher is what I mean. Gotcha. Okay, so it's like, well, I mean, Golf R doesn't really have any trims really anymore, right? It's just kind of like one thing versus the GTI kind of having a selection there. If the price difference is small, then sure, yeah, like I said, same deal. But it really comes down to how much you're going to appreciate those extra perks the Golf R. But GTI is great. I have no complaints about that, aside from the fact that it doesn't offer a manual anymore, and the PDK or the whatever they call it, the DSG, just not Not it's tuned for hypermiling, and that's my biggest annoyance with those cars. You have to either drive it in sport mode or manually shift it everywhere you go if you want to actually have a sporty experience. Regular mode is just complete, boring. But sport mode's, in my opinion, too aggressive, and it's just like everywhere you go, it's feeling frantic. So it's like there's no Goldilocks mode, and so your only choice is manually shifting, which I think it's a little old after a while if you're, having an automatic transmission vehicle, but I guess it's always an option. But that's my only complaint with those. I wish they'd fix that. And there's probably an aftermarket tune to make it a little bit, less of a one extreme or the other kind of thing. But yeah, I always enjoy GTI and Golf R. Definitely check out my videos on them. I do give more thoughts on that whole idea in the moment, in the driver's seat of those vehicles. Especially in my GTI review, I think I did kind of cover the Golf R, placement. This was a couple of years ago, but same kind of thing applies, so hopefully it helps you a little bit, and good luck with your decision. But anyway, yeah, we'll leave it there. But yeah, let me see. Last thing I see, Harsha says all this crap makes Tesla sound very good, regardless of how crap the brand perception is with no dealer. Well, yeah, and that is one great thing about Tesla, but also there's other brands now that have, the no dealer thing too that you can do, like, Rivian and others. So it's not really exclusive anymore. But yeah, I agree. It's nice not to deal with dealers if you can avoid them. So yeah, Josiah says he's blown away by his customer service at his local Volkswagen dealer. I mean, that's everything. If you have a good dealer near you, and you're treated well, then I can certainly see a lot of those things people don't really talk about in the car reviewing world, but that stuff really can influence, sales. And so, yeah, if you have a good experience and a good relationship with them, yeah, Volkswagen makes some good stuff for sure. And GTI and Golf R are both a lot of fun. So best of luck there with the deciding. And yeah, so anyway, thank you all so much for hanging out here on the live stream. Hope you have a great week. And yeah, stay tuned for some more good stuff this week. And yeah, I'll be posting Genesis GV80 with the E supercharger this week, which is a fun little combo. It's twin turboed and has an electric supercharger on it to reduce lag. And that car actually really surprised me. So stay tuned for that one. Kia K4 also coming tomorrow, and really great, fun little affordable vehicle. And so always trying to have something for everybody here. So stay tuned for all that. But anyway, thank you all so much for your support, for watching. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.